Jack's world went dark the moment the plasma blast tore through the trees. His squad had been pinned down, surrounded by shadows that moved with an unnatural precision. He remembered the screams, the smell of burning soil, and then, nothing but the sharp thud of a rifle butt against his head. When he woke, his wrists were bound with cold metal restraints, and the air smelled strange, like iron mixed with ozone. The sky above wasn't the sky he knew. It was darker, filled with streaks of violet clouds that pulsed faintly, as though the world itself was alive. Jack realized then that he had been taken. Not just captured by soldiers, but dragged into the alien war camp. The prisoners were herded into pens, watched over by towering guards whose skin shimmered like obsidian stone. They spoke in guttural clicks and sharp tones, a language Jack couldn't begin to understand. Some of the other humans whispered about them, the Krylons. A species bred for war, relentless and cold. Jack knew little of them, only that Earth's armies had been fighting them for years, and losing. Days blurred together in the camp. The rations were bitter-paced, the nights filled with the hum of alien machinery. Every so often, someone was pulled from the pens and never returned. Jack told himself he wouldn't break. He'd survive, even if it meant enduring the silence, the hunger, the gnawing uncertainty. Then, on the 7th day, they came for him. 2 guards marched him through twisting corridors, deeper into the heart of the facility. The walls glowed faintly, pulsing with blue veins of light. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, each step echoing in his ears. He knew what was coming. Interrogation. Torture. Extraction. When the doors finally slid open, he expected some monstrous warlord, some brutal alien commander ready to tear him apart. But instead, he saw her. She was seated behind a sleek metallic table, her posture straight, her dark eyes locked on him with unreadable intensity. Her skin was a deep, luminous blue that seemed to shimmer in the sterile light, and her hair fell in black waves across her shoulders. Her ears were elongated, sharp at the tips, giving her a look both exotic and dangerous. Jack froze. She wasn't what he expected. She wasn't like the guards. "My name," she said in accented but clear English, "is Sophie." The sound of her voice startled him. It wasn't harsh, wasn't cold. It carried a strange warmth, almost hesitant. Jack narrowed his eyes. "Sophie. That doesn't sound very alien." A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "It's the name your language database assigned me. Easier for you." The guards pushed Jack into a chair and left, the doors sealing shut. Silence settled in the room. Sophie's gaze never left him. "You are a soldier," she said softly. "You were captured in the forest battle. Your unit was destroyed." Jack clenched his jaw. "You think I'm going to tell you anything?" Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something close. "That is what I'm supposed to make you do. Break you. Extract what you know about troop movements, supply lines, defenses." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "But I want to know something else first. Do you believe in your cause? Do you truly think your war can be won?" Her question cut deeper than he expected. Jack glared at her, but inside, something stirred. There was no mockery in her tone. No cruelty. Just curiosity. And for the first time, Jack wondered if his interrogator wasn't his enemy after all. Jack shifted in his seat, testing the restraints on his wrists. They were solid, humming faintly with some kind of alien energy. Escape wasn't possible. Not yet. He fixed his eyes on Sophie. "You really expect me to sit here and spill my guts? You must not know much about humans." "I know more than you think," she replied calmly. Her gaze lingered on him, steady but strangely searching. "I've studied your language, your history. Your kind has fought wars for thousands of years. Always believing you're on the right side." Jack smirked bitterly. "And your people are any different?" That stopped her for a moment. Sophie tilted her head, the black strands of her hair sliding across her shoulder. We are told this war is necessary. That your species is dangerous. That humans cannot be trusted. Jack leaned forward, his voice sharp. And do you believe that? For the first time, her expression faltered. She looked away, as if his question had touched something she wasn't supposed to admit. I'm not here to discuss belief, she said at last. I'm here to do my duty. Jack gave a dry laugh. Yeah. That's what they tell all soldiers. The silence stretched. Sophie tapped something on the table, and a thin panel flickered to life, showing alien script. She ignored it, her eyes drifting back to him. Jack noticed then that she wasn't just interrogating him, she was studying him. Not like a subject, but like someone who was curious. Why are you fighting us? She asked suddenly. Jack blinked. You invaded us. You burned our cities. You killed families. What the hell did you expect us to do? Roll over and let you win? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. It was as if she wanted to argue, yet couldn't find the strength to. Instead, she shut off the screen and stood, her figure moving with fluid grace as she circled the table. When she stopped behind him, Jack tensed, expecting pain, expecting the real interrogation to begin. Instead, she whispered low, close to his ear. What if everything you've been told, and everything I've been told, is a lie? Jack froze. Slowly, he turned his head, but she had already moved back to her chair, her face calm again, as if she hadn't spoken at all. He stared at her, his mind racing. Why would an alien officer, a soldier of the empire that slaughtered his people, say something like that? And then, in that cold, sterile room, something shifted. For the first time since his capture, Jack felt something other than fear or rage. He felt the faint spark of possibility. Sophie wasn't like the others. The days that followed were strange. Each morning, guards dragged Jack back into the interrogation chamber. Each time, it was Sophie waiting for him. And each time, she asked fewer questions about war plans and more about him. Do humans dream? She asked once, her voice quiet as though the walls might overhear. Yes, Jack muttered. Every night. What do you dream of? Home, he said after a pause. Of the forests where I grew up. Of my brother's laugh. Of things I'll never see again. Her dark eyes lingered on him, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw sorrow there. On the fourth session, another figure entered the chamber, a tall alien with armored skin that shimmered silver in the light. His eyes were narrow slits, and his voice carried authority. Report, Officer Sarai, he ordered, ignoring Jack completely. Sophie stiffened. The prisoner resists questioning. He has revealed little. The silver alien leaned closer to Jack, his sharp teeth bared. Resist all you want, human. We have ways to tear knowledge from your mind. Jack spat on the floor. Do your worst. The alien snarled, but Sophie quickly stepped between them. Commander Vaylor, she said carefully, if we break him too soon, he will become useless. Let me continue my method. He is stubborn, but I can wear him down. Vaylor studied her for a moment, suspicion flashing in his eyes. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Do not fail, officer. Or you'll join the prisoners. He left with a hiss, the door sliding shut behind him. The silence that followed was heavy. Jack stared at Sophie. You lied to him. You're not trying to break me. She turned away, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You're right. I'm not. Jack leaned forward, his pulse quickening. Then what are you doing? Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw fear there, not of him, but of her own people. I'm trying to find the truth. And if what I suspect is real, then we are both pawns in a war built on lies. Jack's breath caught. You'd risk everything for that? Sophie looked at him, her expression unreadable. I already am. That night, when Jack was dragged back to his pen, he couldn't stop replaying her words. He wasn't sure if he trusted her, but something inside him whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was his only chance. And perhaps, he was hers. The next time Jack was brought to her chamber, Sophie didn't begin with questions. She dismissed the guards with a sharp order in her own tongue, waiting until the door sealed shut. Then she leaned across the table and spoke in a hushed voice. I can get you food. Real food. Not the paste. Jack frowned. Why would you do that? Because you'll need your strength, she whispered. He studied her carefully. Her blue skin glowed faintly under the sterile lights, her dark hair framing a face that was sharp but softened by something human in her eyes. She wasn't joking. She wasn't mocking him. She was serious. Jack let out a slow breath. And what do you want in return? Her lips tightened. The truth. Not about troop numbers or weapons. About you. About what it feels like to fight for something you believe in. I need to understand. Jack hesitated, then said quietly, it feels like hell. You watch friends die. You wonder if you'll be next. But you keep fighting anyway, because if you don't, then everything they died for means nothing. Sophie's eyes softened. We're told humans are savages. That you fight because you crave blood and conquest. Jack gave a bitter laugh. Savages. You burned our cities first. You started this war. Her expression flickered, guilt breaking through her mask of control. That's what I fear, she admitted. That everything I've been taught is a lie. The door hissed open suddenly, and both their heads snapped up. A guard stepped inside, massive and stone-skinned, his eyes suspicious. His name was Drek. Jack had seen him before, always watching too closely. Report, Drek growled. Sophie straightened instantly, her voice turning sharp, professional. The human resists still. But he's breaking. Slowly. Drek's eyes narrowed on Jack. He looks too strong for a man starved. Jack forced a weak slump in his shoulders, exaggerating the exhaustion he'd perfected in the pens. Sophie didn't blink. After a tense moment, Drek grunted and left. The door sealed again. Jack let out the breath he'd been holding. He's on to you. I know, Sophie whispered. That's why we don't have much time. Jack's heart pounded. Time for what? Her gaze locked on his, fierce and unshakable. To escape. You and me. For a moment, the world fell silent. Jack stared at her, disbelief and hope warring in his chest. You'd betray your people, for me? He asked. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. Not just for you. For the truth. For freedom. For something more than lies. Jack felt the weight of her words settle deep inside him. Against every instinct screaming at him not to trust, he knew in that moment, she meant it. And for the first time since his capture, Jack felt the faintest spark of hope. The next few days were a blur of whispers and stolen glances. Sophie's interrogations became a cover, an excuse to spend hours alone with Jack without suspicion. Each time, she slipped him scraps of food hidden in metal containers, or passed him a water flask filled with something far cleaner than the camp's rations. Jack ate carefully, never too much, knowing that if the guards noticed his strength returning, suspicion would fall on her. You're risking your life every time you do this, he muttered one day, chewing on a piece of strange, sweet fruit she had smuggled in. Her eyes lingered on him, steady and unreadable. I already told you. I'm not risking it for you alone. I'm risking it because I can't live inside this lie anymore. Jack swallowed, his throat tight. He wanted to believe her, hell, he did believe her. But the soldier in him knew how fragile trust could be. And yet, each time he looked into her eyes, he felt his walls crumble a little more. Then, one night, something unexpected happened. When the guards dragged him into the chamber, Sophie wasn't alone. Another alien was waiting, a younger male, slender, with pale blue skin almost translucent in the light. His eyes were wide, nervous, flicking from Sophie to Jack as though unsure if this was a trap. "This is Cale," Sophie said quickly, before Jack could speak. "He's a technician. I trust him." Cale shifted uneasily. "Trust is dangerous," he muttered in their language before switching to halting English. "But I owe Sophie. She saved me once. So now I help her." Jack raised a brow. "And how exactly are you planning to help?" Cale glanced at the door, then produced a small device from his sleeve. It looked like a shard of crystal, glowing faintly. "This will disrupt the camp's surveillance for short intervals. Just minutes at a time. Enough to move without being seen." Jack stared at the device, then back at Sophie. "You're really serious about this escape?" Sophie's jaw tightened. "Once we begin, there's no turning back. If we're caught," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Jack looked between them, the alien officer willing to betray her empire, and the timid technician clutching a stolen tool like it was his last hope. Against all reason, he felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Courage. "When do we start?" he asked. Sophie leaned in close, her voice a whisper trembling with urgency. "Tomorrow night. When the moons align, the guards' rotations will be thinnest. That's our only chance." Jack nodded, his pulse hammering in his ears. For the first time since his capture, the future wasn't just chains and darkness. It was a sliver of freedom. But in the pit of his stomach, he knew one thing for certain: this wouldn't be easy. Because if Commander Vaylor or Drek discovered their plan, none of them would live to see another sunrise. The night of the attempt arrived, heavy with silence. The camp usually buzzed with the hum of alien machinery and the clatter of boots, but tonight, it felt as though the whole place held its breath. Above, two pale moons crossed paths, casting the ground in shifting silver light. Jack sat in his pen, waiting. His heart beat so loud he was sure the guards could hear it. Every sound made him tense: the scrape of armor, the distant growl of alien engines, the shuffle of prisoners shifting in restless sleep. Then he saw her. Sophie. She moved like a shadow, slipping past the guards with practiced grace. When she reached the gate of his pen, Cale appeared at her side, clutching the glowing shard of crystal. He pressed it against the wall. The air shimmered, like ripples across water, and then, silence. "No surveillance," Cale whispered nervously. "We have 3 minutes." Sophie keyed in a code, and the gate clicked open. Jack stepped out, his wrists still bound. She pulled a small device from her belt, pressed it against the cuffs, and they snapped open with a spark. Jack flexed his hands, free for the first time in weeks. He shot her a look that carried more than words: "I'm with you." They moved quickly through the camp, ducking into shadows, slipping past patrols. Jack's soldier instincts returned in an instant, counting footsteps, scanning sightlines, reading the terrain. Sophie guided them with confidence, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. Cale, trailing behind, trembled with every sound. Twice they nearly got caught. Once by a pair of guards, their black armor glinting in the moonlight. Sophie pressed Jack against a wall, her body close to his as the soldiers passed. He could feel her breath against his neck, hear the rapid thrum of her heartbeat. For a second, their eyes met, too close, too dangerous, and then the moment was gone. The second time, it was Drek. The massive guard was prowling near the outer walls, his gaze sweeping the camp like a predator searching for prey. Cale nearly panicked, but Jack grabbed his arm, steadying him. "Not yet," Jack whispered. "Wait for the opening." When Drek turned, they slipped behind a cargo hauler, moving silently until his figure disappeared into the distance. Finally, they reached the perimeter. Beyond the wall lay the forest, dark and wild, but free. Cale pressed the shard of crystal to the wall's energy barrier. The field shimmered, flickered, and then collapsed in a brief window of weakness. "Go," he hissed. They slipped through, sprinting into the trees. Branches whipped against Jack's arms, the air thick with the scent of alien flora. For the first time since his capture, the wind on his face didn't smell like iron and machines. It smelled like freedom. But behind them, a distant alarm began to howl. "They know," Sophie breathed. "We have to keep moving." And so they ran, deeper into the night, with the whole empire soon to be hunting them. The alarm howled through the night, a low, guttural wail that carried across the trees. Jack's instincts screamed at him to move faster, but exhaustion gnawed at his muscles. He'd been half-starved for weeks, and now every step felt like fire in his legs. Sophie ran ahead, her dark hair whipping behind her, glowing faintly under the alien moons. Cale stumbled at the rear, clutching his crystal shard like it was his last lifeline. "They'll deploy trackers," Sophie warned, her voice sharp between breaths. "Hounds, drones, soldiers. We can't stay on the surface paths." Jack growled through clenched teeth, "Then where?" Sophie pointed toward a jagged ridge in the distance. "Caves. There's an old mining system there. Abandoned. It's the only chance we have to lose them." Behind them, the forest lit up in bursts of blue plasma fire. Drek's voice carried through the night, a booming roar in his guttural tongue. He was leading the hunt. "Go!" Jack barked, pushing Cale forward. "Don't stop." The three of them crashed through the undergrowth, thorns tearing at their clothes. Twice, drones zipped overhead, their searchlights slicing through the trees. Jack pulled Sophie down just in time, pressing her against the earth as one of the machines passed inches above their heads. She tensed beneath him, her breath caught in her throat. When the drone vanished, their eyes met in the dark, and Jack almost forgot to move. They reached the ridge just as the first wave of hounds broke through the forest. The beasts were massive, reptilian things with jaws lined in serrated teeth and eyes that glowed like molten gold. Their roars shook the ground. "Climb!" Sophie shouted. Jack grabbed Cale by the arm and shoved him upward. The young alien scrambled desperately, his thin frame quicker than it looked. Jack followed, his muscles screaming with every pull. Sophie climbed beside him, her movements fluid, determined. The hounds lunged at the base of the ridge, snapping their jaws just short of Jack's boots. Plasma bolts scorched the rock around them as soldiers opened fire from the tree-line. They pulled themselves over the ridge's edge, panting, just as the first hound leapt high enough to sink its teeth into the stone where Jack's hand had been seconds earlier. He rolled onto his back, gasping, staring at the alien sky above. Sophie didn't let them rest. She grabbed his arm, pulling him to his feet. "Not yet. Inside the caves. Hurry." They stumbled into the narrow entrance, the stone walls swallowing them in shadows. The howls of the hounds echoed outside, claws scraping at the rock. Inside the darkness, their footsteps echoed. Cale fumbled with a glow crystal, lighting the path in a faint blue glow. Jack glanced at Sophie, his chest heaving. "You weren't lying. They want us dead." Her face was pale in the glow, but her eyes burned fierce. "No," she said. "They want me dead now too. I've crossed the line. There's no going back." Jack met her gaze, and for a moment, there was no war, no chase, just the weight of what they were both risking. "We'll make it," he said firmly. Together. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. The Empire was closing in. And in that dark, twisting cave, Jack knew the real fight was only beginning. The cave swallowed them in silence, broken only by the drip of water echoing through the stone. The glow crystal Cale carried painted the walls in pale blue light, casting long, twitching shadows. Jack's boots crunched on gravel as he followed Sophie deeper inside. His breathing was heavy, but her steps were quiet, almost graceful, as though she belonged in these shadows. Cale lagged behind, his hands shaking as he clutched the light. "They'll find us," Cale muttered. "Drek will track us. The hounds never lose prey." "Quiet," Sophie snapped, her voice sharp but hushed. "The tunnels carry sound." Jack glanced back at Cale, his jaw tight. The boy's nerves were going to get them all killed. He slowed his pace just enough to whisper, "Keep it together. You wanted to help, now's your chance." Cale's wide eyes flicked up at him. "You don't understand. The Empire doesn't forgive. If they catch me, my family. They'll already assume you're guilty," Sophie cut in coldly. "You crossed the line the moment you stood with us." Cale flinched at her words but said nothing more. The tunnels twisted like a labyrinth, narrow passages opening into wide chambers filled with jagged rock. Sometimes the floor dropped steeply, forcing them to scramble down on hands and knees. Sometimes the ceilings pressed low, the air thick with damp earth and the faint tang of metal, remnants of the old mines. Jack's soldier instincts screamed at him. Every sound, every shadow, felt like a threat. And worse, he could hear faint echoes behind them, distant claws scraping stone, the hounds hunting. "They're in the tunnels," he murmured. Sophie nodded grimly. "We need to move faster." Hours seemed to blur together. Jack lost track of time, whether it was night or day outside didn't matter in the endless dark. Hunger gnawed at him again, and fatigue made his limbs heavy. But Sophie never faltered. She led them like she'd walked these paths before, every step sure and steady. At one point, when they paused to rest in a hollow chamber, Jack noticed how her shoulders trembled once she finally sat. She was exhausted too, but she never showed it until she thought no one was watching. He crouched beside her. "You don't have to carry this alone." She looked at him, her dark eyes shining faintly in the glow crystal light. For a moment, the hard mask she wore cracked, and he saw the weight she bore, the fear, the defiance, the loneliness of betrayal. "I chose this," she whispered. "I chose you. There's no going back." Jack's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. Instead, he reached out, resting his hand lightly over hers. She didn't pull away. For a moment, in the middle of a war-torn world, hunted like animals, there was quiet. Just the two of them, holding on to something fragile and real. Then Cale's panicked whisper shattered it. "They're close." The echoes grew louder, shouts in alien tongue, the guttural growl of hounds. Their hunters had found the trail. Sophie pulled her hand free, her face snapping back into steel. "We move. Now." Jack rose, gripping a jagged piece of metal he'd picked up along the way, primitive, but better than nothing. He looked at her, and she looked back, both knowing the same truth. The caves wouldn't save them. They'd have to fight. And the Empire was closing in fast. The sound of claws and boots echoed through the tunnels like thunder. Jack tightened his grip on the jagged scrap of metal in his hand. It wasn't much, just a rusted shard, but in his grasp it felt like a weapon. He'd fought with less. Sophie's hand went to her belt, drawing a sleek plasma blade that hummed with deadly energy. The glow lit her blue skin, casting sharp shadows across her face. Her eyes locked on Jack's. "Stay close. Don't let them separate us." Cale trembled, clutching the glow crystal like a lifeline. "I'm not a fighter, I can't." "You'll survive," Jack cut him off firmly. "That's all you need to do." The first hound lunged from the darkness, its jaws snapping. Jack swung his metal shard with all the strength left in him, slamming it into the creature's skull. Sparks flew as its armored head cracked against the blow. The beast shrieked, staggering back. Sophie moved like lightning, her plasma blade slicing in a clean arc. The hound collapsed with a hiss, its body twitching. But more came. 2, 3, 4 of them, pouring into the chamber, their golden eyes burning in the dark. Behind them, the guttural shouts of soldiers grew louder. Back! Sophie barked. Into the narrow passage. They retreated into a thin tunnel, forcing the beasts to come at them one at a time. Jack slammed his shoulder against the wall, bracing himself as another hound lunged. He drove the shard into its throat, hot blood spraying across his arm. The creature writhed, then collapsed at his feet. Sophie's blade cut down the next with a swift strike, her movements precise and deadly. Jack couldn't help but notice the fire in her eyes. This wasn't duty anymore. This was survival. This was defiance. Cale cowered behind them, screaming when one of the hounds lunged too close. Jack grabbed the creature mid-strike, wrestling its snapping jaws away from the terrified alien. He roared, slamming the shard down again and again until the beast went still. "Move!" Sophie shouted. "They're sending soldiers in next." They scrambled deeper into the tunnel, their footsteps echoing wildly. Jack's lungs burned, his arms heavy with exhaustion, but adrenaline drove him forward. Then, just as they rounded a bend, plasma fire lit up the cave behind them. Blue bolts slammed into the walls, scorching stone. Jack ducked instinctively, pulling Sophie with him. Cale shrieked as the glow crystal flickered in his trembling hands. Drek's voice boomed through the cavern. "Run, traitors! Run until you choke on your fear. You cannot escape the Empire." Sophie's face was set like steel. "He'll never stop. Not until one of us is dead." Jack grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. "Then we make sure it isn't us." The three of them pushed deeper into the darkness, pursued by the relentless fury of the Empire. And for the first time, Jack realized something strange. Fighting beside Sophie didn't feel like fighting beside an enemy. It felt like fighting beside someone he could trust with his life. The tunnels twisted like a labyrinth, each passage looking the same in the dim glow of Cale's crystal. Jack's legs screamed with every step, his arms aching from the fight. But still he pushed forward, Sophie just ahead, her blade lighting the way like a guiding star. Finally, the passage widened into a cavernous chamber. Jagged stone columns rose from the ground like the ribs of some ancient beast, and the air was cooler here, damp with the scent of underground water. A small pool shimmered faintly at the far end, reflecting the faint glow of minerals embedded in the walls. "Here," Sophie said, her voice hushed. "We can rest for a moment. The tunnels branch in too many directions, they'll lose the trail for now." Jack collapsed against a rock, wiping blood, some of it his own, most of it not, from his face. His heart pounded, but the brief reprieve felt like heaven. Cale, on the other hand, was shaking uncontrollably. He paced near the pool, muttering in his own tongue before snapping into broken English. "This is madness. They'll kill us all. You don't understand what the Empire does to traitors, they'll burn whole cities just to make an example." Sophie's gaze snapped to him, sharp as a blade. "Then you should have stayed in your safe little corner, Cale. You chose this." "I chose nothing." Cale hissed, his voice cracking. "You pulled me into this. You think you're fighting for truth, for freedom? There is no freedom. The Empire is everything. You can't break it." Jack rose slowly, stepping between them before Sophie's fury could ignite. "Cale." His voice was low but steady, the same tone he'd used on frightened rookies back in his squad. "Look at me." Cale's wide eyes flicked to him, shimmering with fear. "I've seen empires fall," Jack said firmly. "On Earth, we had armies that thought they'd last forever. They didn't. Nothing does. But people survive. That's what matters. That's why we keep running." Cale's lips trembled, torn between fear and belief. He looked away, muttering something under his breath. But for now, he stayed quiet. Sophie let out a slow breath, her hands unclenching from fists. She turned toward Jack, her expression softening. "You have a way of speaking," she murmured. "Like you've carried others through fire before." Jack gave a tired smile. "I was a soldier. It was my job to keep my squad alive. Didn't always succeed." For a moment, silence filled the chamber, heavy but not hostile. Just silence between two people who had lost too much, yet still stood. Sophie moved closer, her dark eyes meeting his. "You've lost more than you admit. I can see it." Jack's throat tightened. He wanted to look away, but her gaze pinned him. "And you?" he asked softly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I lost myself. Until now." Their faces were close, too close. The weight of war, fear, betrayal, and hope all pressed between them, fragile and dangerous. Jack felt his heartbeat quicken, not from the chase, but from her. But before the moment could break, the faint sound of claws echoed again in the tunnels. The hounds were still on their trail. Sophie pulled back, her eyes hardening again. "We can't stay here. Not unless we want to die." Jack nodded, forcing the soldier back into himself. "Then we move." Together, they stepped back into the dark, their bond stronger than before, because now it wasn't just survival that kept them going. It was each other. The tunnels narrowed again as they left the cavern behind, forcing them into single file. Jack took the lead, Sophie behind him, and Cale trailing nervously at the rear. The glow crystal cast long shadows that swayed across the walls, making the rock seem alive. The silence gnawed at Jack. No more howls, no more shouts of soldiers. It was too quiet. He knew hunts well enough to recognize the pattern. The predators weren't lost, they were circling. "We're being funneled," he muttered. Sophie's voice was low, steady. "I know. They'll try to box us in." Cale whimpered softly. "Then it's hopeless. We should surrender, maybe they'll spare us if we—" Jack spun on him so fast the boy flinched. "Don't you ever say that again. You think they'll spare you? After you ran? After you helped us? No. If they take us, we're dead. All of us." Cale's eyes darted wildly, sweat shining on his pale skin. "Then why keep running? We'll just die tired." Jack's voice dropped to a growl. "Because it's better to die free than on our knees." Sophie's gaze flicked between them, something unreadable in her eyes. She stepped closer to Cale, her tone softer than Jack's. "Cale. Listen to me. I know you're afraid, I'm afraid too. But if we give up now, then everything we've risked means nothing." For a moment, Cale seemed to calm, his breathing slowing. But when Sophie turned to lead them onward again, Jack caught the look in the boy's eyes. Desperation. Calculation. Jack's gut twisted. They pressed deeper into the tunnels until they reached another chamber, this one smaller, the ceiling low. A dead end. Jack cursed under his breath, turning in a circle. "We'll have to backtrack." Before they could, Cale suddenly stumbled forward, dropping the glow crystal. His hands fumbled at his sleeve, and Jack saw the faint shimmer of a comm device hidden there. "Stop!" Jack roared. Cale jerked, eyes wide with guilt, but it was too late. The device blinked red, pulsing once before shattering in his trembling hand. The sound of hounds answered almost immediately, their howls rising from every tunnel at once. Sophie's face went pale. "You called them." Cale dropped to his knees, sobbing. I can't, Drek promised my family would be spared if I led him to you. I didn't mean, I just..." Jack's blood boiled. He surged forward, ready to strike the traitor down, but Sophie grabbed his arm, stopping him. Her eyes burned with fury, but also sorrow. "We can't waste time. They're here." The ground trembled as the hounds drew closer. Cale curled into himself, whispering apologies, but Jack had no time for him now. Sophie raised her blade, her voice sharp as steel. Then we make our stand. Together. Jack lifted his shard of metal, meeting her eyes. Together. And as the tunnels erupted with the sound of claws and plasma fire, Jack knew the next few moments would decide everything. The chamber shook as the hounds poured in first, their glowing eyes slicing through the dark like embers. Behind them, soldiers fanned out with rifles raised, blue plasma already scorching the stone. And towering among them came Drek, his massive frame filling the tunnel, his jagged teeth bared in a snarl. "There is no running," his guttural voice boomed. "The traitor led me right to you. The Empire will burn your names into ash." Kale whimpered, crawling backward until his spine pressed against the stone. His eyes darted between Jack and Sophie, then toward Drek. "I did what you wanted," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I gave them to you. You promised my family would." Drek's response was a bolt of plasma. The shot struck Kale square in the chest, cutting his words short. The boy's body crumpled to the ground, the glow crystal rolling from his limp hand. Sophie's sharp intake of breath echoed louder than the gunfire. Jack felt no pity, just cold rage. "You were right," Jack snarled at Sophie, his eyes locked on Drek. "The Empire doesn't forgive. Not even its own." The hounds lunged, jaws snapping. Jack swung his shard with brutal precision, smashing the first beast's skull before it could clamp onto his leg. Sophie moved beside him, her plasma blade a streak of light as she carved through the next. Plasma bolts rained down. Jack shoved Sophie behind a stone column as the air filled with heat and sparks. Dust choked him, but adrenaline drove him forward. He grabbed one of the fallen soldier's rifles, the alien weapon heavy but familiar enough in his hands. He fired. Blue plasma shot out, slamming into a guard's chest and dropping him instantly. The recoil burned his palms, but Jack barely noticed. Sophie moved like fire, her blade cutting through armor, her strikes fueled not by duty but by defiance. Together, they fought as one, his brute strength and soldier's instincts paired with her precision and speed. Still, there were too many. For every soldier they dropped, two more pushed forward. Drek waded through them like a beast, his massive frame deflecting plasma fire, his roar shaking the chamber. "You are nothing," he bellowed, eyes locked on Sophie. "A traitor to your blood. I'll drag your corpse back to the commander myself." Jack stepped between them, rifle raised. "You'll have to go through me first." Drek's grin was sharp as broken stone. "Gladly." The massive alien charged, slamming into Jack with bone-crushing force. Jack hit the wall, stars exploding in his vision. The rifle clattered to the floor, useless now. Sophie screamed his name, lunging at Drek with her blade. But the brute caught her wrist mid-strike, crushing it until sparks danced from the weapon. He snarled in her face. "You should have stayed loyal." Jack staggered to his feet, blood in his mouth, rage boiling hotter than the pain. He grabbed the jagged shard of metal from the ground and drove it upward with every ounce of strength left in him. The point tore into Drek's side, punching through armor and flesh. The giant roared, staggering back. Sophie ripped free, spinning her plasma blade in a final, savage arc. The weapon cut clean through Drek's throat. For a moment, silence hung in the chamber. Then the hulking guard collapsed, his body shaking the ground. The surviving soldiers hesitated, stunned by the fall of their champion. Sophie turned on them, eyes blazing, blade dripping with blood and light. Jack raised the fallen rifle again, steady despite his wounds. "Who's next?" he growled. The soldiers faltered. Then, one by one, they retreated into the tunnels, their discipline breaking without their leader. The hounds whined and slunk back into the dark. And just like that, the chamber was quiet again. Jack leaned against the wall, gasping, his chest burning. Sophie dropped to her knees beside him, her trembling hand touching his arm. Their eyes met in the dim glow, exhaustion and relief mixing in the same breath. "We're still alive," Jack managed, a broken laugh escaping his lips. "For now," Sophie whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But the Empire won't stop." Jack reached up, brushing his bloodied hand against her cheek. "Then neither will we." In that moment, surrounded by death and darkness, the war didn't matter. The lies didn't matter. All that mattered was the two of them, alive, together, and unbroken. The silence after battle was almost worse than the fight itself. Jack's ears still rang from plasma fire, every breath scraping his throat raw. The chamber smelled of smoke and scorched stone, the floor littered with bodies, hounds and soldiers alike. Sophie rose unsteadily, her blade flickering before sputtering out, drained of power. She stared at Drek's hulking corpse, her jaw tight, then turned toward Jack. "We can't stay. More will come." Jack nodded, forcing his battered body upright. Every muscle screamed in protest, but survival was louder. "Lead the way. I'll keep up." Together, they picked through the tunnels, following faint drafts of air that hinted at an exit. The glow crystal Kale had dropped was still rolling softly where he'd fallen, its light a pale guide. Sophie stooped to pick it up, her expression unreadable. Jack watched her linger there, her gaze fixed on Kale's still form. "He was just a kid," Jack said quietly. Her eyes flicked to him, pained. "And the Empire made him choose death long before we met him. I won't forget him." They moved on. The tunnels sloped upward now, the air fresher, carrying the faintest hint of wind and open sky. For the first time, hope tugged at Jack's chest. After what felt like hours, they stumbled out into the night. The cavern mouth opened onto a ridge high above a vast alien landscape. Twin moons hung heavy in the sky, painting the jagged cliffs and endless forest below in silver light. The air was cold and sharp, but it was clean, so different from the stale prison walls and choking tunnels. Jack staggered forward, breathing deep, his chest rising like he hadn't drawn a real breath in days. "God, it's beautiful." Sophie stepped beside him, her dark eyes reflecting the moons. "I'd almost forgotten." For a long moment, they just stood there, side by side, taking in the view like it was the first taste of freedom. But the sound of distant ships broke the silence, low hums moving across the night sky. The Empire was still hunting. Jack clenched his fists. "They won't stop until they have us." "No," Sophie said softly, but her voice carried steel. "But they don't know where we'll go next. And out here, beyond their cities, there are others. Rebels. Outcasts. People who've been waiting for a reason to fight." Jack turned to her, a spark in his tired eyes. "And we'll give them one." She met his gaze, her hand brushing against his, hesitant at first, then firm. "Together." Jack squeezed her hand, the weight of war still heavy, but no longer crushing. "Together." The night wind swept over them, carrying the scent of wild earth and the promise of something more than survival. Behind them, the Empire raged. Ahead of them stretched a world untamed, dangerous, but theirs to claim. And as Jack and Sophie disappeared into the wild under twin moons, they weren't just fugitives anymore. They were free.